Captain Susan Miller stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Horizon, watching the massive alien ship grow larger on the view screen. Her heart beat faster with each passing second. After decades of space exploration, humans had finally found other intelligent life. "Are we ready for this?" asked Admiral Alan Parker, standing beside her with his hands clasped behind his back. Susan took a deep breath. "Ready as we'll ever be, sir." The first message from the aliens had arrived 3 days ago. They called themselves the Galactic Hegemony, rulers of over 2,000 star systems. Their message was formal, filled with titles and ceremonial language. The translation computers had struggled to make sense of it all. "Communication officer, hail them again," Susan ordered. Patricia Wilson nodded and pressed several buttons on her console. "Channel open, Captain." Susan straightened her uniform jacket. "This is Captain Susan Miller of the Earth exploration vessel Horizon. We are honored to accept your invitation and request permission to come aboard." The view screen flickered, revealing a tall, purple-skinned alien with elaborate gold markings across its forehead. When it spoke, its multiple voice boxes created an odd musical quality. "The Grand Hegemony acknowledges your transmission, primitive but promising species. I am Grand Overseer Zalathor, 17th level dignitary, keeper of the sacred protocols, master of the 77 ceremonies, supreme voice of the eternal emperor." The alien paused, clearly expecting some reaction. Susan blinked. "It's nice to meet you, Grand Overseer." The alien seemed disappointed by her simple response. "You may approach docking bay 7012B. Prepare to demonstrate proper greeting rituals." The screen went dark. "Well, that was intense," said Engineer Kevin Harris, whistling softly. "They certainly like their titles," Susan agreed. "Let's prepare the diplomatic team. Whatever these proper greeting rituals are, we need to be ready." 4 hours later, Susan led a small team through the massive docking bay of the Hegemony flagship. The alien vessel was enormous, easily 20 times the size of the largest human ship. Everything was decorated with intricate patterns and symbols, giving the impression of a floating palace. A line of purple-skinned aliens stood waiting, all wearing elaborate robes and headgear that looked strangely like upside-down kitchen funnels, painted with gold swirls. "Remember," Susan whispered to her team, "this is the most important first contact in human history. Let's make Earth proud." Grand Overseer Zalathor stepped forward. In person, he was nearly 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and eyes that blinked sideways. His headgear was the largest and most elaborate, a purple contraption that rose at least 2 feet above his head, wobbling slightly when he moved. "Behold," Zalathor announced, raising all 4 arms, "I shall now recite the 17 sacred greetings, as has been done for 10,000 years when meeting new species." What followed was a 17-minute speech in which Zalathor barely seemed to breathe. He described the glory of the hegemony, the power of their empire, and the great honor being bestowed upon humanity by this meeting. Admiral Parker tried to maintain a serious expression, but halfway through, dust from the ancient ship tickled his nose. He tried to hold it back, eyes watering with effort. "And furthermore, as the ancient texts decree," Zalathor was saying when Admiral Parker finally lost his battle. "Achoo!" The sneeze echoed through the vast chamber. Every alien froze in place. The silence was absolute. Excuse me, Admiral," Parker said, his face reddening. Zalathor stared at him with all 3 eyes blinking rapidly. "You have interrupted the sacred greetings. This has not happened in 7,000 years." "I'm very sorry," Parker said. "Just a sneeze. Please continue." The aliens whispered among themselves. Finally, Zalathor nodded stiffly. "We shall begin again from the beginning." Susan fought to keep her expression neutral as the Grand Overseer started his 17-minute speech over again. She noticed small devices attached to the aliens' throats, translation units, she guessed. Halfway through the second attempt, one of these devices sparked. Zalathor continued speaking, unaware of the malfunction, but the translation coming through the humans. Earpieces suddenly changed, I, Supreme Cosmic Butthead, welcome you inferior beings to witness our totally awesome greatness. Susan bit her lip hard. Admiral Parker's eyes widened. Behind them, Patricia Wilson made a strange choking sound. The mistranslation continued for another minute before a junior alien noticed the sparking device and rushed to fix it. By then, the entire human delegation was struggling not to laugh. When the translation returned to normal, Zalathor was saying, "And we have studied your world for many cycles. We have observed your leaders and cultural practices." A large screen activated behind him, showing footage of Earth. To Susan's horror, it was an episode of The Three Stooges, showing Mo hitting Curly over the head with a hammer. "We recognize your most respected leaders demonstrate ritual combat," Zalathor said solemnly. "We have prepared appropriate accommodations based on your cultural norms." Susan couldn't help it. A small giggle escaped her lips. Zalathor's head funnel wobbled dangerously as he turned to her. "You express the joy noise during sacred protocol? Explain." "I apologize, Grand Overseer," Susan managed, trying to compose herself. "On Earth, that is not our leaders. That is entertainment, what we call comedy." The aliens looked at each other in confusion. "Comedy?" asked a smaller alien wearing slightly less ridiculous headgear. "This concept does not translate. It means something. That makes us laugh because it's funny," Susan explained. Funny? The aliens seemed even more confused. It was at this moment Susan realized they were dealing with a species that had no concept of humor. The thought made the situation even more absurd. A junior alien approached Zalathor and whispered something. The Grand Overseer's eyes widened. "We have made a grave error in our research," he announced. "We must consult the ancient protocols for guidance on species with defective emotional regulation." As the aliens huddled together in serious discussion, their enormous headgear bobbing with each movement, Susan looked at her team. Admiral Parker was biting his knuckle. Patricia Wilson had tears streaming down her face as she tried not to laugh. Even the usually serious security officer Frank Nelson was turning red with the effort of keeping quiet. "Captain," Kevin whispered, "I don't think they've ever heard a joke before." Susan nodded slowly, a realization dawning. They had encountered a galactic superpower with thousands of worlds under their control, and somehow these aliens had built their entire civilization without developing a sense of humor. This first contact was going to be more challenging than anyone had imagined, and much, much funnier. As Zalathor turned back to the human delegation, his ceremonial headgear slipped sideways, giving him the appearance of wearing a purple traffic cone as a hat. That was the moment the entire human delegation lost their battle with composure. The sound of human laughter echoed through the ancient halls of the Hegemony flagship for the first time in 10,000 years. The age of cosmic seriousness was about to end. The next day, the human delegation was given a tour of the massive Hegemony flagship. Patricia Wilson walked alongside a junior alien officer named Zix, who had been assigned as their guide. Unlike the senior officials, Zix wore only a small purple cap instead of the elaborate headgear. "And this is the Hall of Ancient Protocols," Zix said, pointing to a large room filled with what looked like scrolls. "Here we keep the 10,000 years of rules that govern all hegemony behavior." "Do you really follow all these rules?" Patricia asked, amazed at the sheer volume of scrolls. "Of course," Zix replied, blinking his 3 eyes in surprise. "How else would one know how to behave correctly?" Patricia pulled out her tablet and showed Zix an image. "This is what we call a meme. It's a joke about rules." The image showed a cat sitting on a keyboard with text reading, "I do what I want." Zix stared at it for a long time. "The small fur beast is breaking protocol by sitting where it does not belong," Zix said slowly. "And it admits this violation?" "That's what makes it funny," Patricia explained. "Sometimes breaking small rules can be amusing." Zix looked deeply troubled. "I must report this concept to my superiors." Before Patricia could stop him, Zix hurried away. She sighed. This cultural exchange was not going well. Meanwhile, engineer Kevin Harris had been invited to observe the Hegemony's engine room. He watched as 6 alien technicians performed an elaborate ceremony around a door panel that was stuck. "Great door of passage, we humble ourselves before your mechanism," chanted the lead technician, waving a tool that looked like a wrench wrapped in ceremonial ribbons. After 10 minutes of chanting, the door remained stuck. The aliens prepared for another round of ceremonial repair attempts. "Excuse me," Kevin said, stepping forward. "May I try something?" The aliens looked shocked but stepped aside. Kevin examined the panel, found a loose connection, and fixed it in seconds. The door slid open smoothly. The alien technician stared in horror. "You did not follow the sacred repair protocol," gasped the lead technician. "This is forbidden." "But the door is fixed," Kevin pointed out. "The method is more important than the result," the technician insisted. "We must report this violation immediately." As Kevin was escorted away, he realized something important about the hegemony. Their technology wasn't actually as advanced as it first appeared. They were simply following ancient instructions without understanding how anything worked. Back in the diplomatic quarters, Captain Susan Miller received disturbing news. The hegemony's Council of Supreme Elders had called an emergency meeting about the humans. "This isn't going well," Admiral Parker said, pacing the room. "They've labeled Patricia a distributor of forbidden concepts, and Kevin a technological deviant." "It gets worse," Susan said, looking at her tablet. "Their military advisor, Commander Kraz, is pushing for us to be quarantined. He thinks our behavior is some kind of psychological warfare." Olivia Young, the team's anthropologist, had been quiet until now. "I think I understand what's happening," she said. "The hegemony has eliminated all creativity and humor from their society. They've been following the same rules for so long that they've forgotten why the rules exist." "That explains a lot," Susan nodded. "Their technology is old. They're not inventing new things because innovation requires breaking rules and thinking differently. And humor is the ultimate rule breaker," Olivia added. "It plays with expectations and turns things upside down. That's why they find our laughter so threatening." Just then their door slid open. Grand Overseer Zalathor entered, flanked by guards. His ceremonial headgear today was even larger than before, with dangling purple tassels that swung with each step. "The Council has reached a decision," Zalathor announced. "Humans have been officially classified as chaotic entities of concern. You will all submit to ceremonial behavior modification immediately." "What does that mean exactly?" Susan asked, trying not to stare at the wobbling tassels. "Your minds will be purified of dangerous thoughts, such as humor and creativity," Zalathor explained. "It is for your own good. A properly ordered mind follows protocols." The human delegation exchanged alarmed glances. This had gone from funny to dangerous very quickly. "I'm afraid we must decline," Susan said firmly. "Humor and creativity are essential parts of being human." Zalathor's headgear wobbled violently as he shook his head. "Refusal is not permitted by protocol. Guards, take them to the ceremony chamber." As the guards moved forward, the ship suddenly shuddered. Alarm sounds began to blare. A small alien rushed into the room. "Grand Overseer, emergency in the lower decks. The humans' repair methods have spread." "What?" Zalathor demanded. "Junior technicians are fixing things without following protocols. Systems are working better than ever, but it's complete chaos." Zalathor made a strangled sound. "This contamination must be contained. Council meeting immediately." As Zalathor rushed out, Susan turned to her team. "I think we've started something." Later, that day they learned that the situation was indeed spreading. After seeing Kevin's quick repair, young hegemony technicians had started experimenting with their own shortcuts. The results were improved efficiency throughout the ship, but total panic among the leadership. "They've never seen change before," Olivia explained as the team gathered in their quarters. "Their society has been static for thousands of years." "It's not just the repairs," Patricia added, checking her tablet. "That meme I showed Zix, he shared it with others. There's an underground network forming, sharing Earth jokes and memes. They're calling it the Fun Rebellion." Frank Nelson, who had been exploring the ship's security systems, spoke up. "I've made contact with some of the lower deck workers. They're a species called Zorblaxians conquered centuries ago and forced to work as janitors. They love what's happening." "Why?" Susan asked. "Because they've been making small acts of rebellion for generations," Frank explained. "Moving things slightly out of place, pretending not to understand orders. They call it playing dumb, but it's actually quite smart. They recognized us as kindred spirits right away." A soft knock at their door revealed Zix, looking nervous. "Captain Miller, I must speak with you. Something important is happening." Zix explained that the hegemony's younger members were fascinated by human concepts. A secret gathering was planned in the maintenance decks, the first comedy show in hegemony history. "Will you come?" Zix asked, his eyes blinking rapidly with excitement. "It is forbidden, of course, but I want to laugh." Susan looked at her team. They all nodded. "We wouldn't miss it for the world," she said. That night, they slipped through the ship's corridors, guided by Zorblaxian workers who knew all the secret passages. In a large maintenance bay, they found over 100 young hegemony citizens gathered in secret. A young officer named Plex stood on a makeshift stage. He was wearing a crudely made version of the Grand Overseer's ceremonial headgear, crafted from cleaning supplies. "Welcome to the first meeting of the Laughing Rebellion," Plex announced. "Tonight I will perform what humans call an impression." He straightened his makeshift headgear and began walking with an exaggerated wobble, mimicking Zalathor's pompous stride. "I am Grand Overseer Zalathor. My headgear is bigger than my brain." The room erupted in nervous giggles, which quickly grew into full laughter. The sound was strange. Many of the aliens had never laughed before and were just learning how. Susan watched, amazed. Something powerful was happening here. The hegemony was beginning to change, all because humans couldn't stop laughing at their absurd formality. As the night continued, more aliens took the stage, each breaking protocols in new and funny ways. The revolution had begun, not with weapons, but with laughter. News of the secret comedy show spread quickly through the lower decks of the Hegemony flagship. 3 days after the first performance, Captain Susan Miller was surprised to find small groups of junior aliens nodding to her in the hallways. Some even attempted Earth gestures like thumbs up or friendly waves. These gestures were clumsy but sincere. "They're learning fast," Olivia Young whispered as they walked to a meeting with the Hegemony Council. "I've never seen cultural exchange happen this quickly. People who have been denied something their whole lives tend to grab it with both hands when they finally get a chance," Susan replied. They rounded a corner and found Grand Overseer Zalathor waiting with his advisors. Today his ceremonial headgear was even taller, with blinking lights that seemed designed to show his increased importance. "Humans," he greeted them coldly. "The Supreme Council has reviewed reports of your influence on our citizens. The findings are disturbing." "How so?" Susan asked, maintaining a neutral expression despite the ridiculous lights blinking above Zalathor's head. "Junior officers are skipping ceremonial greetings. Maintenance workers are solving problems without consulting the ancient manuals. And worst of all," Zalathor's voice dropped to a horrified whisper, "people are making the joy noise during official functions." "You mean laughing?" Admiral Parker asked. "Do not speak that word," Zalathor hissed. "It is now forbidden throughout the hegemony." Commander Kraz, the military advisor, stepped forward. He wore battle armor instead of ceremonial robes, and his headgear was shaped like a sharp blade. "This human corruption must be contained," Kraz declared. "I have ordered all humans confined to quarters until we can transport you to a quarantine planet." "That seems extreme," Susan said. "We've only been sharing our culture just as you've shared yours." "Your culture is a disease," Kraz replied. "It destroys order. It questions authority. No empire can survive such chaos." As guards approached to escort them away, a small alarm sounded on Zalathor's wrist device. His eyes widened as he read the message. "Impossible," he gasped. "Lower deck productivity has increased by 40%. How can this be?" "Perhaps because your workers are happier," Olivia suggested. "Humor relieves stress, Happy workers are more productive. Zalathor seemed torn. The hegemony valued efficiency, but not at the cost of breaking tradition. Before he could respond, the ship's communication system suddenly activated. Lieutenant George Russell's voice boomed throughout the corridor. "Good morning, Hegemony flagship. This is your friendly human lieutenant coming to you live from, well, somewhere you haven't found me yet." The aliens froze, staring at the speakers in shock. "Since we've been put under house arrest for the crime of being too much fun, I thought I'd introduce you all to an Earth tradition called radio shows. Today's topic: why are the hegemony's hats so ridiculous? Call in with your theories." Zalathor made a strangled noise as his own headgear light blinked wildly. "Find him and shut this down immediately." The guards rushed off, leaving the human delegation momentarily unattended. Susan exchanged looks with her team. "I think George just bought us some time," she whispered. "Let's use it wisely." They quickly split up, each heading to different parts of the ship where they had made allies. Frank Nelson went to the security decks to meet with his Zorblaxian contacts. Patricia Wilson headed for the communication center where many young officers had become fans of Earth memes. Kevin Harris returned to the engine rooms where his quick fixes had earned him a following among the technicians. Susan and Olivia followed Zalathor and Kraz at a distance, watching as the leaders struggled to contain the growing chaos. Throughout the ship, aliens were laughing openly now, sharing jokes, and, most shocking to the leadership, ignoring announcements about returning to proper protocols. "The Empire is falling apart over a few jokes," Olivia observed. You wonder how solid it was to begin with. Power built on fear and rigid control is always fragile," Susan replied. "All it takes is for people to start asking why, instead of just following orders." They watched as Kraz grew increasingly angry, while Zalathor seemed more confused than anything else. The two leaders began arguing, with Kraz demanding military action against the humans and any aliens who had been infected with humor. "We need to find out more about the hegemony's history," Susan said suddenly. "There has to be a reason they developed such a rigid society." Olivia nodded. "Let's find Zix." He mentioned something about archives. They found the junior officer hiding in a supply closet, listening to George's ongoing comedy broadcast with several other young aliens. "Captain Miller," Zix exclaimed. "You should not be here. Commander Kraz has ordered your arrest. We need your help, Zix," Susan said. "We need to access the Imperial archives. There must be something in your history that explains why humor became forbidden." Zix hesitated, then nodded. "There are ancient records few are allowed to see. I can take you there, but it's very dangerous." The small group made their way through rarely used maintenance tunnels, guided by a Zorblaxian worker named Blim who knew every hidden passage on the ship. They eventually reached a sealed chamber deep in the heart of the flagship. "The original records," Zix whispered, pointing to a room filled with ancient data storage devices. "Only the Grand Overseer and Supreme Elders are permitted to view these. Can you access them?" Susan asked. Zix nervously placed his hand on a scanner. To everyone's surprise, the door opened. "My genetic line includes archive keepers," he explained. "I didn't know if it would still work." Inside, they found the oldest records of the hegemony. Olivia, with her background in anthropology and linguistics, began working with Zix to translate the ancient files. "This is amazing," she said after an hour of research. "According to these records, the hegemony wasn't always this way. 10,000 years ago, they were very different." "How so?" Susan asked. "They were explorers, traders, and entertainers," Olivia explained, eyes wide with surprise. "The early hegemony was famous for their comedy performances. They traveled between star systems, putting on elaborate shows that parodied serious empires." "You mean they were jokers?" Susan asked, amazed. "The biggest in the galaxy," Olivia nodded. "The ceremonial headgear, the elaborate titles, the ridiculous protocols, it was all part of an act. They were satirizing the idea of a pompous galactic empire." "But something changed," Zix said quietly, reading through more records. "There was a war with another empire. Many died. When it ended, the new leaders decided that order and tradition were needed to prevent future conflicts. So they took the joke and made it real," Susan realized. "The fake ceremonies became actual traditions. The mock-serious protocols became law, and over thousands of years, they forgot it was ever meant to be funny. Meanwhile, throughout the ship, Commander Kraz had lost patience with Zalathor's indecision. The military leader staged a sudden coup, declaring himself emergency overseer and ordering the arrest of not only the humans, but also any alien showing signs of humor infection. George Russell's voice came over the communication system once more, sounding urgent. "Attention, friends. Commander Kraz has taken control of the ship and is sending troops to all decks. Anyone caught laughing or telling jokes is being arrested." "This is not a joke. Well, I guess that's the problem, isn't it? Stay safe, everyone." Susan looked at the ancient records, then at Zix and the other young aliens who had gathered in the archive room. "I think we found the answer," she said. "The hegemony needs to remember its own history. You weren't always a humorless empire. Laughter is part of your heritage." "But how do we tell everyone?" Zix asked. "Kraz controls all official communications now. Then we'll use unofficial ones." Susan smiled. "The same way Earth jokes spread through your ship, person to person, whisper to whisper. The truth about your past is the best joke of all. Your whole empire started as a comedy act." As commander, Kraz prepared to execute his plan to purify the hegemony of human influence. A new rebellion was spreading through the ship, not with weapons, but with a 10,000-year-old punchline that the hegemony had forgotten. Commander Kraz moved quickly to secure his power. Guards in battle armor patrolled the hallways, arresting anyone who showed signs of what Kraz called humor infection. The once quiet corridors of the hegemony flagship now echoed with the sound of heavy boots and occasional shouts. "This has gone beyond a cultural misunderstanding," Admiral Parker said as the human team regrouped in the archive room. "Kraz is turning this into a military crisis." "We can't let him win," Susan replied. "Not now that we know the truth about the hegemony's history." The truth had shocked everyone. According to the ancient records, the galactic hegemony had begun 10,000 years ago as a traveling performance group. They had created an act that made fun of serious formal empires. Their silly headgear, pompous titles, and ridiculous ceremonies had all been part of the joke. But after a devastating war, the new leaders had decided that strict order was necessary. Over generations, the joke was forgotten. The fake traditions became real rules that no one dared question. "We need to spread this information," Olivia said. "But Kraz controls all the official communication channels." "We'll use the unofficial ones," said Patricia Wilson, who had joined them after hiding from Kraz's guards. "The same networks that spread Earth memes can spread historical truth." Zix, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "There is one official channel Kraz doesn't control yet. The emergency broadcast system can only be activated by a Grand Overseer's genetic code." "But Zalathor is under arrest," Frank Nelson pointed out. "Not exactly," came a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a Zorblaxian worker named Blim enter with another alien hidden under cleaning robes. The hidden alien pulled back his hood, revealing the elaborate face markings of Grand Overseer Zalathor. His ceremonial headgear was gone, and without it he looked much less imposing. "Kraz thinks I am locked in my quarters," Zalathor explained. "But the Zorblaxians helped me escape through maintenance tunnels."
"Why would you help us?" Susan asked, surprised. "You were ready to have us all arrested for spreading humor." Zalathor looked down. "I have read the ancient records myself. I always knew they existed, but I never wanted to believe
what they said. It was easier to follow tradition than to question why those traditions existed." "And now?" Olivia asked. "Now I see that the hegemony has lost its way," Zalathor said. "We were never meant to be this rigid, this humorless. Kraz represents everything we've become at its worst. He would turn us into a true empire of fear, not just a ceremonial one." "So you'll help us?" Susan asked. Zalathor nodded. "I will activate the emergency broadcast system. Every screen on every hegemony ship and planet will receive the transmission. You can show everyone the truth." They quickly formed a plan. While Zalathor and the humans prepared the broadcast, the Zorblaxians would spread word through the lower decks. The young officers who had embraced Earth humor would create a distraction to draw away Kraz's guards. Kevin Harris worked with the ship's technicians to ensure the broadcast couldn't be easily shut down. Lieutenant George Russell, still in hiding, would continue his unauthorized radio show to keep spirits up and pass coded messages. As they prepared, Susan noticed that Zalathor kept touching the top of his head, where his ceremonial headgear used to be. "Missing your hat?" she asked. "It feels strange without it," he admitted. "I have worn it every day since I became Grand Overseer. It was my identity." "The true you isn't defined by a hat," Susan said gently. "Just as the true hegemony isn't defined by empty ceremonies." Zalathor seemed to consider this. "Perhaps you are right. Still, I feel naked without it." "I have solution," Blim the Zorblaxian said, offering Zalathor a small cleaning cap. "Not fancy, but good hat." To everyone's surprise, Zalathor put on the simple cap and laughed. A short, awkward sound as if he were trying it for the first time. "How do I look?" "Like a leader who cares more about his people than his appearance," Susan replied. 2 hours later, everything was ready. Zalathor placed his hand on the genetic scanner that controlled the emergency broadcast system. Screens throughout the ship flickered to life. "People of the hegemony," Zalathor began, standing tall despite his simple cap. "I speak to you not as your Grand Overseer, but as a fellow citizen who has discovered a truth about our past." As Zalathor spoke, Olivia displayed the ancient records showing the hegemony's origins as performers. Images of the original troupe wearing exaggerated versions of the now serious ceremonial outfits filled the screens. "Our empire began not as an empire at all, but as a comedy," Zalathor declared. "Our sacred protocols were jokes. Our ceremonial headgear was meant to make people laugh." Throughout the ship, aliens stopped and stared at the screens. Some looked shocked, others confused, and a growing few, began to smile. "Commander Kraz would have you believe that humor is a disease," Zalathor continued. "But it is the cure for what ails us. We have forgotten how to question, how to change, how to grow. We have forgotten how to laugh at ourselves." On the command deck, Kraz watched the broadcast with growing fury. "Shut it down," he ordered his technicians. "This is treason." But the technicians, inspired by Kevin's examples of ignoring useless protocols, pretended not to understand the commands. "So sorry, Emergency Commander, the system is very complex. We must follow proper shutdown protocols which take approximately 3 hours. Kraz grabbed a weapon. "Then I will deal with this myself." He stormed out with a group of loyal guards, heading for the broadcast location. Back in the archive room, they received warning of Kraz's approach. "He's coming with armed guards," Frank reported, checking a security feed provided by his Zorblaxian contacts. "We need more time to finish the broadcast," Olivia said, still displaying historical records. "Then we'll buy you time," Susan decided. She turned to Zalathor. "Keep talking. Show your people the truth. We'll handle Kraz." Susan, Frank, and Admiral Parker positioned themselves in the corridor outside the archive room. They had no weapons, but they had something potentially more powerful. They had jokes. When Kraz and his guards rounded the corner, Susan stepped forward. "Commander Kraz. Or should I call you Emergency Overseer? That's quite a title. Do you know what we call power-hungry leaders on Earth? Comedians? Because they're such jokes." Kraz raised his weapon. "Your humor cannot save you now, human." "Maybe not," Admiral Parker called from another position. "But before you shoot, don't you want to know why the Grand Overseer crossed the galaxy?" Despite himself, Kraz paused. "Why?" "To get to the other tide." Parker delivered the punchline with perfect timing. Kraz looked confused. "That makes no sense." "Exactly," Frank shouted from his hiding spot. "Just like your coup makes no sense." As the humans continued distracting Kraz with increasingly absurd jokes, something unexpected happened. The guards behind Kraz began to snicker. One let out a small laugh, then quickly tried to hide it. Kraz whirled around. Who did that? Who dared make the forbidden noise? No one admitted it, but another guard failed to suppress a chuckle. "You are all contaminated," Kraz shouted, now pointing his weapon at his own guards. The human disease has infected you too. One brave guard stepped forward. It's not a disease, Commander. It's freedom. Freedom to question. Freedom to laugh. More. Guards lowered their weapons, some removing their helmets to reveal smiling faces. Kraz backed away, realizing he was losing control. This is mutiny. I will not allow it. But as he raised his weapon again, a small cleaning drone zoomed between his legs. Kraz stumbled, his elaborate military headgear slipping down over his eyes. He tripped and fell, landing in an undignified heap. The corridor filled with laughter, from the guards, from the humans, and from the Zorblaxians who had operated the cleaning drone. Kraz sat up, his once fearsome presence now a comical sight with his crooked headgear. For a moment he looked as if he might explode with rage. Then something unexpected happened. His face twitched, his eyes widened. And Commander Kraz, terror of the hegemony fleet, did something no one had ever seen him do before. He laughed. Commander Kraz's unexpected laughter spread through the corridor like a wave. Guards who had been tense moments before now relaxed, some even helping Kraz to his feet as he tried to control his own chuckling. I don't understand, Kraz said, adjusting his crooked headgear. What is happening to me? You're experiencing humor, Susan explained. Sometimes when something unexpected happens, especially if it makes someone look silly, we laugh. But I was angry, Kraz said, looking confused. I wanted to shoot you. Why did I make the joy noise instead? Because deep down, you saw the absurdity of the situation, Admiral Parker said. You, the mighty commander, tripping over a cleaning drone and landing on your rear. It was funny. Kraz touched his headgear thoughtfully. I have never laughed before. Not once in my entire career. It was not unpleasant. Meanwhile, Zalathor's broadcast had reached every corner of the hegemony. On thousands of ships and hundreds of planets, aliens watched in amazement as their Grand Overseer revealed the truth about their history. For too long we have forgotten who we truly are, Zalathor was saying. We began as creators of joy, not enforcers of rules. It is time we remembered that. All across the flagship, aliens were removing their ceremonial headgear. Some were laughing openly. Others were simply talking with each other without following the usual protocols of rank and ceremony. Susan, Admiral Parker, and Frank escorted Kraz to the broadcasting room. The commander seemed deep in thought, no longer hostile but clearly struggling with everything he had learned. Inside the room, Olivia had finished showing the historical records. Zalathor was now speaking directly to his people. I propose a new beginning for the hegemony, he said. One that honors both order and creativity. One that allows for both tradition and change. One that remembers how to laugh. Kraz stepped forward. May I speak? He asked, surprising everyone. Zalathor hesitated, then nodded. Kraz moved to stand beside him in the broadcast. People of the hegemony, Kraz began, his voice firm but less harsh than before. As your military commander, I have always believed that strict order was necessary for our survival. I was wrong. The room fell silent, everyone shocked by this admission. A few moments ago I experienced laughter for the first time, Kraz continued. It was enlightening. I realized that the very structure I sought to defend was built on a forgotten joke. What does that say about the seriousness with which I have lived my life? Kraz reached up and removed his blade-shaped headgear entirely. Without it, his face looked younger, less severe. I withdraw my claim as emergency overseer, he announced, and I support Grand Overseer Zalathor's call for a new beginning. The broadcast ended, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then Lieutenant George Russell's voice came over the communication system one last time. Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all configurations, this is your friendly human radio host signing off. It seems the revolution of laughter has succeeded. Regular programming will now resume, though I suspect nothing will be regular in the hegemony ever again. The next few days were busy ones. Throughout the flagship, changes were happening faster than anyone could track them. Aliens who had never spoken to each other were now having conversations. Junior officers were suggesting improvements to systems that had remained unchanged for centuries. And everywhere there was laughter. Captain Susan Miller found herself invited to an emergency session of the Hegemony's High Council. Unlike previous formal meetings, this one had a different feel. The ancient chamber was filled with council members, but most had removed or modified their ceremonial headgear. Some wore simpler caps while others went bareheaded entirely. Captain Miller, Zalathor greeted her. The council has been discussing the future of the hegemony and our relationship with Earth. I'm glad to hear it, Susan replied. I hope we can establish friendly relations. More than that, Zalathor said. We would like to propose a new kind of alliance, not based on military power or trade agreements, but on cultural exchange. One of the council members, an elderly alien with simple headgear, spoke up. We have been stagnant for thousands of years because we forgot how to question our own ways. Humans reminded us of the value of seeing things differently. We would like to establish what we're calling the Galactic Comedy Council, Zalathor explained. A gathering where representatives from different worlds can share their cultures, especially their humor. The theory, Kraz added, now wearing a much smaller and practical military cap, is that species who can laugh together are less likely to fight each other. Susan smiled. That sounds like a wonderful idea. Earth would be honored to participate. The first meeting of the Galactic Comedy Council happened 1 week later in the flagship's largest gathering hall. The space had been transformed from a formal ceremonial chamber into something more like a theater. Representatives from various planets within the hegemony attended, along with the complete human delegation. To everyone's surprise, the Zorblaxians were invited not as servers but as full participants. Blim and his fellow workers took seats of honor near the front. Zalathor opened the session wearing a simple version of his old headgear, tall enough to be recognizable but not so elaborate that it prevented him from moving normally. Welcome to the First Galactic Comedy Council, he announced. Today marks a new chapter for the hegemony, or perhaps I should say, for the galactic community. For too long, we ruled through rigid tradition. Today, we begin leading through understanding and joy. The first presenter was a young hegemony officer named Plex, who had performed in the original secret comedy show. He did a series of impressions of high-ranking officials, including one of Zalathor that had the Grand Overseer himself, doubled over with laughter. Next came representatives from various worlds, each sharing their own forms of humor. Some were strange to human ears, like the Zorblaxian comedy that consisted entirely of making cleaning-related puns. Others were surprisingly familiar, like the physical comedy performed by a species from the outer rim that resembled Earth's slapstick. The final presenter was a surprise to everyone. Commander Kraz stepped onto the stage looking uncomfortable but determined. I have spent my entire life serious, he began. I never laughed, never joked, never saw the value in such things. But recent events have taught me that sometimes the most serious person in the room is actually the biggest joke. He paused, then continued. So I have prepared what humans call a stand-up comedy routine about my experiences this past week. What followed was Kraz's awkward but heartfelt attempt at humor. His timing was off and some jokes fell flat, but his willingness to laugh at himself won over the audience. By the end, everyone was applauding. As the council session concluded, Susan found herself standing with Zalathor and Olivia, watching the various species mingling and sharing stories. It's remarkable how quickly everything has changed, Olivia observed. Not everything, Zalathor replied. The changes you see were always waiting to happen. Your arrival was simply the spark that lit the flame. What happens next? Susan asked. We rebuild the hegemony into something better, Zalathor said. Something that honors both our forgotten past as entertainers and our potential future as explorers and innovators. A junior officer approached them with a message. Captain Miller, we've received word of another empire at the galaxy's edge. The Sovereign Collective. They're known for their rigid hierarchy and complete lack of humor. Susan and Zalathor looked at each other and smiled. Perhaps, Zalathor suggested, they could benefit from a diplomatic visit. I'll prepare my team, Susan replied. After all, we humans have developed quite a reputation as chaos agents. Not chaos, Zalathor corrected her. Joy. You brought joy to a joyless empire, Captain Miller. And for that, the galaxy will forever be in Earth's debt. As they looked out at the hall full of laughing beings from dozens of worlds, Susan couldn't help but feel proud. Humanity's first major contribution to galactic civilization hadn't been advanced technology or military might. It had been something much simpler and much more powerful, teaching an ancient empire how to laugh again. The end.